Boo! Pretty scary, huh? We are rapidly approaching the holiday known as Halloween. It is next Friday. And our kids will be celebrating today after church with a party in Chapel Hall. I am sure most of them will also be going out trick-or-treating later this week, probably in the same costumes that they are wearing today. Some Christian groups and churches don't allow the celebration of Halloween because they think it is a pagan festival. Despite the fact that there is disagreement on that issue among religious and folklore experts, some arguing that it was a Christian observance from its very beginnings, it possesses Christian significances regardless of where its roots lie, and its celebration has probably been influenced by Celtic harvest festivals, particularly Samhain, spelled S-A-M-H-A-I-N and pronounced Samhain, a word which means in Old Irish, summer's end. In any case, it seems to me, and at the very worst, that Halloween is a fun time for young and old, and that few people really take seriously some of its more macabre and frightening customs. The word Halloween is a contraction of All Hallows Evening or Holy Eve, and begins the 3-day period which continues with All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, a period reserved for remembering the dead, including saints, martyrs, and all faithful departed believers. Typical activities of the Halloween celebration include trick-or-treating, also called guising, costume parties, carving pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns, apple bobbing, visiting haunted houses, playing pranks, telling scary stories, and watching horror films. Although in some parts of the world attending worship services and placing candles on the graves of the dead are also common activities. Today's Halloween customs are thought to have been influenced by folk customs from Celtic-speaking countries, some of which customs have pagan roots, while others may be rooted in Celtic Christianity. Jack Santino, an academic folklorist, suggests that the sacred and the religious are a fundamental context for understanding Halloween in Northern Ireland. But there, as throughout Ireland, an uneasy truce exists between customs and beliefs associated with Christianity and those associated with religions that were Irish before Christianity arrived. Perhaps we can conclude that this truce or balance exists to some extent everywhere that Halloween is celebrated and where Christianity has any presence and importance. In terms of the Samhain influence of Halloween, the festival marked the end of summer and the beginning of winter, considered to be the darker half of the year. This was seen as a limited time when spirits or fairies, sometimes recognized as degraded versions of ancient gods, would come into our world and be particularly active. They were both respected and feared by people who had not yet put them entirely aside, even after converting to Christianity. And such folks might seek to propitiate them by offering them food and drink in the hope that their lives and livestock would thereby survive the winter. In many cultures, the souls of the dead were thought to visit where they had once lived, and so the current occupants would set places for them at the table or by the fire to welcome them into their homes. Sometimes on Samhain, rituals and games were used to try to divine the future, especially regarding death and marriage, the two not necessarily being connected. And bonfires believed to have cleansing and protective powers were often lit in imitation of the sun, with its powers of growth and ability to hold back the decay and darkness of winter, and or to scare away witches by reminding them of what awaited them in hell. I said earlier that many of the customs of Halloween have always had or have now acquired religious significance, regardless of their origins. How about looking at a few? To repeat, Halloween falls on the evening before All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. Since the time of the primitive church, major festivals like Christmas, Easter, Pentecost began with vigils the night before. Halloween then was the start of that 3-day period designed to honor the saints and pray for those recently departed souls which had not yet reached heaven. By the end of the 12th century, these had become holy days of obligation throughout Europe, days when church bells would be rung and criers dressed in black would parade the streets, calling on people to remember those who had died. Souling, the custom of baking and sharing soul cakes in honor of departed souls, along with walking the streets in black, is thought to be the initial origin of trick-or-treating. The custom grew and expanded with the passage of time. Poor people, often children, would go door to door collecting these soul cakes as aids to praying for the dead. And to assist the poor people, these would fill empty stomachs at the same time. What about wearing costumes while roaming from house to house? Prince Sori Conte, a minister in Canada, has written its explanation. It was traditionally believed that the souls of the departed wandered the earth until All Saints' Day, and All Hallows' Eve, Halloween, provided one last chance for the dead to gain vengeance on their enemies before moving to the next world. In order to avoid being recognized by any soul they might be seeking vengeance, people would don masks and costumes to disguise their identities. Additionally, during the Middle Ages, when churches displayed the relics of martyred saints during Hallowtide to help parishioners with their devotions, those churches too poor to possess such relics might have congregants dressed up like saints instead. So costumes were worn to hide from the vengeful dead, not much good theology there, and remember the saints. Think about that when the little ghosts and goblins come to your door next Friday. Jack-o'-lanterns have become a popular symbol of Halloween. Originally, they represented the souls of the dead. And while we carved pumpkins to create these artistic masterpieces, that custom didn't start until the holiday moved to North America. In Europe, turnips were used. And there is a popular Christian folk tale from Ireland associated with them. Apparently, Jack, on his way home from a night of drinking, encountered the devil and somehow tricked him into climbing to the top of a tree. Thinking quickly before the devil could come down, Jack carved a cross in the bark, thereby trapping him among the branches. Jack and the devil struck a bargain that Satan would never claim his soul. Years later, after a life of sin, Jack died and was denied entry into heaven. But the devil, holding a grudge and honoring their agreement, refused to let Jack enter hell either, and for good measure threw at Jack a live coal from the fires. It was a cold night, so Jack placed the coal in a hollowed-out turnip to preserve its heat and to help him stay warm. And ever since, he and his lantern have been roaming the world looking for a place to rest. What about costume parties? Could they have a religious significance? As a matter of fact, yes. It was believed in medieval Europe, especially France, that on Halloween the dead would rise from their graves to one wild and hideous carnival known as the Dance Macabre, an event commonly depicted in church decorations on the walls of monasteries and cathedrals. Writing in the New Cambridge Medieval History, Christopher Almond and Rosamund McKitterick explain, Christians were moved by the sight of the infant Jesus playing on his mother's knee. Their hearts were touched by the Pieta, and patron saints reassured them by their presence. But all the while, the Dance Macabre urged them not to forget the end of all earthly things. Hence, parties at which folks dress up in all kinds of ghoulish costumes, although I am sure they are not thinking of the Dance Macabre when they do so. It is easy to see how at least some of the common elements of Halloween celebrations seem centered on death and using symbols associated with death. Fires set to keep away ghosts and spirits, haunted houses designed to frighten people, the blessing of homes and fields to ensure good fortune, especially of a harvest nature. In the year ahead, skulls and skeletons, witches and warlocks, all these remind us of our mortality and depict our fear of that which we cannot understand. But at Halloween, these are no longer what we are thinking about when we simply use the holiday as an occasion for fun. The costumes, the games, the parties, aimed only at enjoyment. And maybe a bit of greed on the part of enthusiastic young trick-or-treaters. Some churches, though, still use it as a means of getting their message across, or at least a message across. While some congregations denounce Halloween as of the devil, I guess they still take it seriously. Others, instead of fun-motivated haunted houses, construct depictions of hell to scare the hell out of people. Hell showing fire and brimstone, satanic figures tormenting sinners for eternity, and gory forms of violent death. That, of course, would be in stark contrast to our Sunday school kids, who are more likely to be decked out as ballerinas and hobos, and this year as Elsa or Anna from Frozen. Various places in the Old Testament speak about witches and wizards, and there were laws against the practice of such arts. I read to you from Exodus, which had nothing to do with that whatsoever. I think it was someplace in Leviticus that I meant to be reading. But anyhow, laws were made to prohibit mediums and people of that nature among the Israelites. And they were specifically forbidden by God to engage in such practices. And one of the reasons given by God for driving out Canaan's current inhabitants and giving the land to the Hebrews was because they, the Canaanites, did believe in the occult. Then later, King Saul, his reign going down the tubes because of some decisions he had made and some actions he had taken, on account of which he lost the support of Samuel, went to a medium who was doing that which was illegal to see if he could contact the spirit of the dead Samuel for advice, since God seemed to have deserted him. Witches, sorcerers, mediums, already in ancient Israel they were feared and despised. So perhaps it is not so strange that so much was made of them in the Middle Ages, feelings which still exist in the hearts and minds of some today. But Halloween is really for those seeking a good time, while perhaps more seriously reminding us of our mortality and encouraging us to remember those who have passed away. Additionally, All Saints and All Souls Days honor our deceased loved ones and those who were particularly strong in the practice of their faith, even to the point of torture and death. And as a final note, it was on October 31, 1517, that Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses on the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany, this becoming a major mover in what will become known as the Protestant Reformation. Now, there's been a kind of an unusual sermon this morning, an unusual sermon mentioning creepies and crawlies and things that go bump in the night. So I've got an idea just to end it. How many would like to hear a ghost story? Show of hands. You want to hear a ghost story? Okay, then I'm going to tell you one. Now, I can't turn out the lights and I can't make it dark, so you're going to have to use your imaginations and make believe you're back as a kid where you were out in the woods someplace, whether as a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout or maybe with a youth group or just your family that went camping. And the lights were dark and you had a big bonfire right in the middle. That was the only light, and as the sparks flew up into the air, somebody started to tell a ghost story. Now, I ought to issue a warning here, just like they do at Busch Gardens or Universal in one of those places, with a sign that says, if you're pregnant or have a heart condition, put your fingers in your ears so you don't get scared, because this is really scary. The story was first told, I believe, by Mark Twain, and it's called The Golden Arm. And I've had a lot of fun with it with my kids and grandkids over the years, so, hopefully you'll enjoy it. It says that many years ago, a man and a woman, elderly man and woman, went to build a farm, a large farm, someplace in the prairies of the Midwest. And as they grew older, time passed and she sickened and died. Now, she was very unusual because as a young woman, she had been the victim of a tragic accident. And her arm had to be amputated, and it was replaced by a golden arm. So she wore this for all of these years, grew to old age, and this was a prized possession of hers. And so she passed away, and it was a cold and stormy night when they were going to have the funeral services. So the few neighbors, because they lived in the middle of nowhere, they placed her body in the buckboard, and they took her out to the far end of the farm where she should be buried. And they went out there, and all the proper words were spoken, all the proper actions were taken. But her husband decided that it would be pointless to bury her with this golden arm. It was of great value. So before they buried her, he removed the arm. And they finished the ceremony. Well, with that, the wind started to pick up, and it started to rain a little harder. And he thought he heard whistling through the wind, "Who took my golden arm? Who took my golden arm?" He starts looking around. The wind is picking up. It gets a little louder. "Who took my golden arm?" Well, he starts getting a little bit nervous, starts to sweat despite the cold. They turn around. They start heading back for the farmhouse. And as he's going, the wind is picking up. The wind is picking up. It's getting colder and colder, rainier and rainier. And he continues to hear this. "Who took my golden arm? Who took my golden arm?" Well, now he's running. He's racing back for the house. He gets to the door. He opens the door. "Who took my golden arm?" He slams the door with his back to it, and he hears reverberating throughout the house, "Who took my golden arm? Who took my golden arm?" "You took it!" Happy Halloween.